head back into the classroom this week. There are concerns over whether schools will be able to remain open after a possible post-Christmas surge in Omicron cases among pupils and, of course, staff.
Yes, ministers suggest combining classes and bringing back retired teachers to help keep schools open. But should they stay open no matter what? We went to find out what you thought.
I think it's really important that they're back at school. The impact was so detrimental academically, but also on their mental health.
Bad, I suppose, because you've got to do the COVID test, but then it's good because it feels safe.
When they didn't have to wear a mask, she was often preferring to, so she's happy to do that, and that's her choice.
I'm also kind of a bit anxious. I think a lot of people are, about how COVID's spreading really, really quickly through school as well.
Joining us now is Sir Michael Wilshaw, former head of the education watchdog Ofsted, who thinks head teachers need to get creative to keep students in school. Rob Carpenter is chief executive of the Inspire Partnership Trust, running 9 primary schools in South London and Kent, but warns it might not be possible to keep them open. Very good morning to you both. Rob, can I just establish, you're running primary schools. There are different rules, aren't there, for primary school pupils going back compared to secondary school pupils?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. For primary school children, they don't have to wear face masks, and that provides a little bit more flexibility, and they don't move around buildings as much as secondary school pupils. So the context of a primary environment is slightly different for those reasons.
What has been the impact on primary school pupils of 2 years of COVID restrictions and, of course, the months of lockdown?
I cannot overemphasize the impact we felt across our schools, but I go to schools all over the country and I've seen exactly the same things. Pupils age 4 and 5 losing language, the inability to communicate and socialise effectively within groups. We've seen pupils with complex SEND needs really struggle to adapt to being back in a classroom environment. Special educational
needs, yeah.
We've also seen huge challenges and barriers with regards to learning loss from certain pupil groups, particularly amongst our poorest communities. Yeah. It's been unbelievable, the impact that we faced, and it presents challenges still now.
So is it your thought that any more shutdown, online learning, taking pupils out of classrooms would be a grievous error? Do you still see that as a possibility that needs to be considered?
I think anybody working within the profession recognises we've got to do all we can to keep our schools open. We've seen the impact it's had over the past 2 years. It's been huge. Pupil mental health, the challenges that presents are real in the classroom. It's shocking to see the impact and what's happened. However, whilst we want our schools to remain open, we've also got to recognise the impact that it's having in terms of staff absences, maintaining routines and expectations within schools and classrooms. In one of our schools, for example, just before Christmas, out of a staff of 45, we had 20 that were off directly related because of COVID. Now, we did all we could to keep every class open, but it was just unrealistic and impractical. So we had to close 2 classrooms and move to a blended remote learning environment. But then, of course, we did everything we could to make sure that those children had the best learning provision possible.
20 out of 45 is a huge number, isn't it? So, Michael Wilshaw, just on secondary schools wearing masks, which they have to do as things stand until January the 26th. I was reading an article by Zoe Williams in The Guardian, who says that she's never heard a teenager complain about wearing a mask to school, that teenagers are really adaptable, and that it's us older people who are fighting on their behalf. Do you think there's anything in that?
No, she's absolutely right. Young people are adaptable. Young people want to go back into school. They want to mix with their friends. They want to be in a normal environment again. It would be a disaster if they can't do that. So up to Christmas, I was working in a school and the youngsters were wearing masks, both in the corridors and social spaces, but also in classrooms as well. They're very adaptable young people. I think when it gets to adulthood and oldies like me, we're less adaptable, but youngsters are adaptable. And as I say, they will want to be back with their friends in school learning. We're facing a lost generation of young people who have suffered immensely. over the last two years through lockdown and the restrictions. We want to get back to as normal a school as possible, for all the reasons that mother articulated. It's not just about learning loss, and we've youngsters, particularly from poor backgrounds, have suffered a huge amount of learning loss over the last few months, but also in terms of their well-being and mental health. So head teachers and good head teachers will find a way around this and keep their schools open.
Now, Rob, you know that Sir Michael he's obviously retired from schooling and teaching and is going back to help. He believes that's a good way for schools to get back on their feet. You, Rob, apparently think it's delusional to think that a few teachers returning from retirement will make much of a difference.
What I think, Richard, is that it masks a bigger problem, which is that the drop-off rates of recruitment into the profession, and also the numbers of teachers that leave the profession so soon after starting the teaching profession. Why I think it's problematic is that for many children, particularly the most vulnerable children, what they need is stability, they need routine, they need familiar people around them, people that they know. And for those reasons, that's why schools need to remain open. And for those reasons, that's why schools are reallocating staff to support the most vulnerable pupils. But to bring in people into our school communities that we perhaps don't know, we don't know their skills, their assets, what they can bring, particularly at short notice, and then to allocate those staff members to particular classrooms in an unplanned, uncoordinated way, I think that's really challenging. I would much rather see a planned approach to recruitment, a planned approach to how we use our parent community better to ensure that, we work with families where, in Medway, for example, where some of our schools are, we've got a parent program. We're working with parents to help them understand how they can support their children's learning in school as well as at home.
Please, Rob, let's not go back to home learning. Please, not parents having to teach children. Honestly,
I'm not saying that.
It's so much pressure, isn't it, for parents?
Absolutely, but what I also think is that there are good opportunities to use our parents and use our own community resources to ensure that we keep schools open children are in learning.
Let's talk to Sir Michael about that, because you are, Sir Michael, I mean, you're very well, you're so skilled and experienced. You ran Ofsted, you've run schools. So you're very experienced. What has it been like as a retired teacher going back into the classroom?
It's been absolutely fine. And most schools that I know, and I know schools mostly in the secondary sector and not the primary sector, because I was a secondary teacher and secondary head teacher, will have a list of names of people who have recently retired from their schools and will be in touch with them now. Look, the bottom line in all this is that if we've got a head teacher workforce that are going to be creative, that are going to resolve the problems and are determined to keep their schools open, then they will keep them open. Unfortunately, I have to disagree with your primary head teacher that you just spoke to. Yeah. A defeatist attitude will not get us anywhere. Our children are suffering. And we've got to make sure that the suffering that they've experienced over the last 2 years is put an end to. And this is the time to do it. Yeah.
I'm sure Rob would deny the fact you have a defeatist attitude. It's just a difference in attitude, isn't it? So, Michael, before we let you both go, there were changes, mitigations made to the GCSE and A-level exams this year. But those were made before we saw this surge in Omicron cases and the crisis in some schools over staffing levels. Do you think there should be extra changes made to the GCSE and A-level exams? And also, let's not ignore the fact there are BTEC exams going on this month.
Well, teacher-assessed grades were in existence up to the end of the summer term, and they worked pretty well. But even with teacher-assessed grades, we saw the differentials in performance being very marked indeed, with those with those youngsters who were ahead before the pandemic started in the selective sector, in the grammar school sector, for example, getting further ahead, and those who were behind before the pandemic started particularly youngsters from poor backgrounds, falling further behind. And we've got to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I would expect head teachers in the secondary sector to pull out all the stops to prepare their youngsters for their examinations if they go ahead, but to ensure that the teacher assessed grades if they don't go ahead, or there's a combination of both, are robust and properly moderated.
Okay.
And that those youngsters from disadvantaged background do much better this time round.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So
Fascinating.
Michael Wilshaw and Rob Carpenter, thank you. And good luck to you both as
Thank
well.
you.
And good luck to all teachers, because, you know, it's going to be a very tough week. Of course, students in secondary schools are asked to wear masks, a lot of staff shortages and a lot of infections amongst pupils as well.